As I shared at the beginning of the year when we started this sermon series, we are meeting as the church council and some other members of the church who've wanted to be involved in some planning, looking forward for Woodland Baptist Church. And all of that starts with our mission. All of that starts with that phrase of who we are and what we're called to do. Not how we do it, but what we're called to do. And for 51 and a half years now, we have lived our mission of sharing Christ's love with others. We have lived that mission well. But I think that there's been a part of the call of the church that may not have been communicated, acted on, maybe as much as we should be, even as we love. And that's that call to go. That's that call to go. We sort of put together several of the gospel accounts of the commission that God gave His disciples and thus gave all of us in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark and Luke in the book of Acts, where it says our mission is to make disciples, preach the good news, and be Jesus' witness to the world. Now that is every Christian church's mission. And it's very appropriate to lay over top of that call to go and love. I think our strong suit has been loving those who we've encountered and loving those who have come. But I think it's time for us to love those as we go. To love those that God lays on our heart. That's going to be an important part today for us, is asking God to lay on your heart somebody, something, some place that you can call your own in prayer and be in prayer for and support financially and possibly even go. One of the pillars of Islam is to make pilgrimage. Once in their life, they're called to make the pilgrimage or make the Hajj to Mecca. It's a part of proving their worth to Allah. We don't need to prove our worth to God. Jesus made us worthy. We aren't to go to prove to God we love Him, or to prove to God we care, or to prove to God we are good. We go so that others might hear and discover the love of God that we've discovered in our life. That's the importance of going. In our Jerusalem, we've talked about our Jerusalem, going into our neighborhood, into our school place, into our workplace, into all those places that we interact with every single day. Go and not only share the love of Christ, but share the gospel of the good news, so that others might hear and believe. We talked about our Samaria and our Judea, which is still a familiar place. It's outside maybe of our comfort zone, but it's not terribly uncomfortable. It's places we are familiar with, places that we go semi-regularly. I use the term, think about able to drive there. But then we've got to talk about our beyond. Our uttermost places of the earth. Places that we are unfamiliar with and possibly even uncomfortable with. How many of you have been to Louisiana with us? Down to Lake Providence. My challenge to you all today is if you have never been to Lake Providence, go this year. Oh, that entails me having to get off work. That's right. That entails me to have to use 1 week of my vacation. Yes, it does. Okay. It's hot down there. Yes, it is. There are fire ants and mosquitoes. Yes, there are. But there is an opportunity to make disciples. There, in Lake Providence, is an opportunity to change a world. Just by loving and sharing with these kids that they graciously give us for an entire week. These kids are good kids. They have very difficult lives and are very different than us. And for some of us, that may be as beyond as we get. But we all have to accept the call to go. Go to our beyond. We all are called to get out of our comfort zone. Get to an uncomfortable place where we have to absolutely trust God to see us through. This is one of the challenges that we should be praying, each of us individually, that God would lay on our heart, that God would lay on each of our hearts a people, a place, a nation, a city that we could pray for regularly. Not only that we could pray for, but that we could support financially, and beyond that, even possibly visit. To go. That is every one of our responsibilities as missionaries, as the mission of our church, as the mission of the Church Universal, is to pray and support and go. And I will promise you that if you pray for God to lay a people group or a nation or a city on your heart, He will do that. He will give you your very own people, your very own city, your very own nation. Now, it won't be yours alone. There'll be a lot of people across the world praying for them and supporting them. But it's something that He will give you. And that you can be tangibly involved in mission. In making disciples. Prayer is the most important component about making disciples. Because let's say he lays Uganda on your heart. All right? In laying Uganda on your heart, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to pray for the nation and the people. Well, the neat thing is, we've already got missionaries in Uganda. Men and women and families that are about the task of sharing God's gospel and making disciples in Uganda every single day. Indigenous missionaries, people from Uganda, preaching and teaching Ugandans, and people from around the world. So your prayer is going to open the door to the gospel even more for the people who are already there ministering in Uganda. Secondly, I ask you to pray that God will lay on your heart the desire to support those people. The men and women, the churches, the orphanages, the people already there working for the gospel, that you could personally support. How do you find that out? Well, we've got this great thing called the internet nowadays, and you can find anything about anything at any time. And all you need to type in is Uganda and missionaries. And you'll get a big list of men and women who are serving for the gospel's sake in Uganda. Write one of them a letter. Send an email. Tell them that God has laid Uganda on your heart and that you're praying for Uganda and that you found their name and that you're praying for them too. I think I can guarantee it. I think I can guarantee it. They will respond to you. Because it excites them when they find someone who is supporting them. Someone that they didn't know about. Someone that they hadn't heard about. That they now know is praying for them and for their family day in and day out. Now you've accomplished two of those tasks. You prayed for the nation and you're supporting a missionary or a mission group in that country or among that people group. And you continue to do that and you continue to work it. And then my prayer is at some point in your life, while you're able, that God will open the door for you to go. Most of us won't go and preach revivals in front of 20,000 people in a soccer stadium. Okay? That's not the go I'm talking about. The go I'm talking about is going and visiting that missionary. And making that personal connection with their little town or their little suburb of an inner city or their little neighborhood that they minister in. And then they'll show you around and they'll take you and introduce you to people. And you'll hear about all these wonderful stories that God has done in this nation, among this people group. And you will come back a changed person. And you will preach this sermon 1,000 times over to everyone you meet. Because you prayed and you supported and you went. Every one of us as a Christian is called to do that, is called to go. If you have your Bible, open up to Revelation. Chapter 7, starting in verse 9. Revelation 7, starting in verse 9. It's a picture of heaven. It's early on in Revelation, but this is one of the visions that John was given. He said, "After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, and people, language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And they were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" Every people, every nation, every tribe, and every language. Christianity is not ours to hoard. Christianity is not our little secret. Christianity is for the world. And for the world to discover it, we must go and make disciples and preach the gospel to all nations, all tribes, all people, and all languages. And that includes you and me. You don't get an exempt out clause. Now, maybe as far as you will get in the endeavor of the mission is your Jerusalem. And that may be what God has called you to. You might say, you know what? Your people group is right here. So some of you might pray that, and you say, okay, God, lay a people group on me. Lay a nation on me. Lay a people on me. And you get real excited. And all of a sudden, God lays on your heart Height Elementary School. You go, oh, come on. I was hoping for something over in South America or Africa. Height Elementary School is as important a mission field as the nation of Uganda is. And maybe your call is to pray for and support and visit Height. Now you say, John, we're talking about our beyond. I know we are. Okay? But the fact of the matter is, not everybody's called to the beyond. Even for a week trip. But we are all still called. That's why that prayer is so important. God, lay onto my heart the people group, the nation, the tribe, the language that you want me to be personally responsible for as a Christian. And if it's Height Elementary School, then that's your mission field. And you say, oh, all my kids are in middle school now. What am I going to do? They still need volunteers. They still need prayer. They still need support. The principal needs encouragement. The kids need mentors. If that's where you're called, that's where you'll go. For some of you who go to Lake Providence regularly, Lake Providence might be your go. And that might be your mission field. Every summer, God says, it's time to go again. And you get your time off request into work, and you get everything together, and you go. And it's different kids, and it's some of the same kids, and it's different environments, and it's different places we meet, and we do different things. But see, if that's your call, then you need to be praying every day for Lake Providence as a community. For the sheriff, and for the school superintendent, and for the employees at the prison that employs the majority of the adults in the community, and for the kids, and for their parents, and for all of the absentee fathers in Lake Providence. And you need to support them. We regularly do things for Lake Providence, sending stuff down. We've got a new missionary down there, Mark, who we're just beginning to build a relationship with. But, when Jenny was down there, she'd call us and say, hey, we need this. And, we'd get it together and we'd send it down there. So we supported them. We supported Jenny. We'll support Mark. But if that's what God lays on your heart, if Lake Providence is what God lays on your heart, then that has to become your passion. That has to become your go-to when you pray. And that has to be where you go to during the summer. Now, there'll be summers that come that you just can't go. I get that. But if that's your call, that's your connection. And then for some of us, it will be farther out into the beyond. Maybe God will lay on your heart an unknown people group or an unchurched people group. You say, well, John, there aren't any unchurched people groups. There are, especially in the rainforest in South America. There are people groups that have very little connection with any outside other people groups. There are people groups who were still headhunting up into the 80s. Now, I'm not saying that's where you should go. That's a little scary, even for me. Well, you start with the prayer. And then you find out if there's any organization ministering to or working with this community of people, and then you support that. And then who knows, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, God might open the door for you to be able to go. But we are all called to that mission. To that every tongue and every tribe and every nation, we are called to go. And this is our step. Pray, support, and go. Every one of us are required to enter into this process as a disciple of Jesus Christ. You are a disciple of Jesus Christ. You will pray, support, and go as He calls you. And it all boils down to Matthew chapter 25. This is where it always comes back for me. Matthew chapter 25. If you have your Bible, open up. Starting in verse 31. This is why we make disciples. When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before Him. Every tongue, every tribe, every nation. And He will separate the people one from another. As a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And He'll put the sheep on His right and the goats on His left. Our job as the people of God is to make that group of goats as small as possible. By giving them an opportunity to hear the gospel. Because what happens as He separates the sheep and the goats? It says, the king will say to those on his right, the sheep, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. That is living and loving the gospel as we go. It says, then the righteous will answer Him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. Go. That's the fulfillment of the go. But that's not the end of the story. He says, then He'll say to those on His left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. And they will answer Him, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? And He will say, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for the least of these, you did not do for me. Then they went away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Our responsibility is to put the gospel out there for everyone to hear. No, it's God who does the connecting. It's God who softens the heart. It's God who draws the human. It's God who connects to that eternity. But it's us who start the process. And we can't do that just sitting here on a Sunday. We've got to go. Go and make disciples. Go and preach the good news that others might hear and believe. That's a call that every one of us has as a disciple of Jesus Christ. No one is exempt. So as we move forward as a church, this concept of going is going to be very important in our future. Remember, it has different levels and it has different directions. But none of us can escape the fact that we're called to go. We're all called to pray. We're all called to support. In one way or another, we're all called to go. Within our Jerusalem, within our Judea, within our Samaria, and into the beyond. You can sit here this morning, you can try to rationalize away the reasons that you're not going to go. But those reasons aren't from God. And those thoughts are sowed by one person alone. It's the enemy. We know where he ends up. According to Matthew, he and his angels end up in the lake of fire, along with all those who refuse to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. Again, my imagination is a little wacky. I know I'm in the line with the sheep. Okay, I am assured of that. But I don't want to be standing in the line with the sheep and see somebody that I had an opportunity to witness to and to share with, and I didn't, over in the goats, walking toward the edge of the water. Remember the water that burns, sulfur and brimstone and lava and all that wonderful stuff. I don't want to see somebody over in that line. That was my responsibility to minister to here on earth. Now, if I minister to them and I shared the gospel and I gave it to them and they refused it, okay. But if God said, go and share, and I said, no, and left, and that person ends up in the wrong line, for me, in my imagination, that's not going to be a happy moment. So where is God calling you to go? What is He calling you to do? How is He calling you to do it? Only you know. My challenge is that you begin with prayer. That we might all make disciples, preach the gospel, and be Jesus' witness to the world. That starts with being saved yourself. If you're here this morning and you're not a believer, you've never made that personal confession of Christ, you've never said yes to God, then this morning is the morning to do that. Simply say, God, I choose to follow you. I believe that Jesus died for my sins and that He rose again and that He sits at the right hand of the Father according to the Scriptures and that He will come in glory again to judge the living and the dead. I want to be among the living. Transform me from a goat to a sheep. That's all it takes. Maybe you've backslidden, to use a fancy, non-biblical or theological word. Maybe you've been away from God for a while. Maybe you've gone your own way. You're the prodigal son or daughter, and it's time to come home. He stands at the end of the drive with his arms open wide, simply waiting to hug you in his warm embrace and say, welcome home. Or maybe he's called you to be a part of our community of faith here at Woodland. Be a part of our fellowship. And from here, for you to pray and to support and to go. God lays something on your heart this morning to respond to. My prayer is that you respond. And if He lays a word on your heart that He wants you to share with the church that has nothing to do with your salvation or your backslidden state or your church membership, but He's got something that He wants you to share with this community of faith, simply come up and sit down, and when we finish our song, we'll let you share it.